Yesterday's update may have broken the game, but they did do a quick turnaround to fix a lot of the issues. So the game is playable. We were able to unlock and test the new stuff like this HRM9, which is actually pretty solid. But the other thing I wanted to point out, because it changes a lot of loadouts, is this new little unlockable within that same little square of the battle pass. It's an aftermarket part called the Jack BFB. And why it's so interesting is because of its pros and cons. If you actually look at the recoil control section, you can see it is significantly improving this, which makes a lot of guns that would normally or ordinarily be non-viable or non-meta a little bit could slip into the mix. It does also have this ADS speed penalty, which isn't really a big deal depending on the weapon you're using it on. But the other part is this increased radar detection. So if you're going to be using this in some of the loadouts and you're comfortable with being on the mini map, this thing is going to be huge. And you can see right here in the side-by-side comparison, you can see how it impacts you're popping up on the minimap. Normally, if you fire an unsuppressed weapon, you're gonna be on the minimap for about 3 seconds. With this, you're going to be on the minimap with the directional arrow, which is kind of good for some people because then it removes the elevation that normally appears, but it increases the length of duration to about 4 seconds, about a 30% increase. And we did manage to update the TTK chart to include all the updated values that were updated on true game data. We did some other manual testing because he was missing a few things because you need to unlock the new gun, which we had done. So we tested that live on stream and it definitely fits in. You can kind of see where things lay out. You can see a bunch of different options. There's probably a few others that just aren't going to make it in today's video, but it kind of gives you an idea of what is good. And this is linked in the description if you want to keep a little bit of a copy for yourself. So they did a decent amount of weapon balancing, particularly multiplayer. This is specifically for Warzone, and we'll go ahead and kind of go through some of the various options. Some I do like more than others, and there's some that you may like more than others, and certain attachments do come down to preference. And I'll give you examples throughout, and it kind of comes back to, do you want to be suppressed? Well, certain class setups might not be for you. Another class, you might just swap it up for your individual preference. But more often than not, a lot of these you can go ahead and kind of take them, just use them as is, or tweak them to fit your preference. Definitely viable is the MCW with the conversion kit. I know the MCW got a buff, not really a buff that it needed. It definitely needs more juice to actually even be viable within the current meta. But we can go ahead and see here the solo MCW. I say solo is the 40 round mag, can get the job done in solos and duos, but it gets a little tricky after that. And it can even be a solo sniper support. And we go ahead and combine that with the Bas-B, which can be used as sniper support or long range. You can make it sped up a little bit faster if you want, but keep in mind you will have more recoil penalties associated with that. MCW with the conversion kit is this particular build here, primarily built for a little bit of mobility, recoil control. It's kind of a little bit set there. And in some instances, you might prefer optic over iron sights. In those cases, you're going to have to make the judgment call on what you want to remove from the loadout. Then we got the Bas-B, which is kind of all around good. You can, like I said, you can use this Cassis break, which is kind of the normal one that a lot of people are going to with, or this brand new Jack BFB, which is insane. So you can kind of go ahead and pick and choose which works best for you. I think a lot of people make the transition to that. If you're already on the mini map, what's the big deal? Just go ahead and shoot straight. I'm not necessarily a fan of the iron sights of this. I would prefer even if it was a reflex sight, but it gets kind of tricky. What do you drop? Next up is one that I don't think will really be receiving any touches in the meantime, which is the SVA. It's a very solid, low recoil, easy to use, not overly dominant in the TTK department, but pretty much anyone can use this weapon, combined with a very low recoil with a no stock striker. Obviously, everyone goes for the mobility, but to go no stock, it was a little bit tricky to maintain that recoil. With that new muzzle, it makes it that much easier because, like I mentioned, if you remember in the original build where I explained the differences, you want that horizontal recoil with this gun for whatever reason around 11 or lower. And this allows you to get there versus some other options didn't allow for it. And with this, you can still maintain insane mobility, maybe not get the fastest TTK, but you're still going to be able to control it and have that mobility of the no stock without having the insane recoil penalty the no stock gives you. And like I said, you can mix and match any long or short range. I'm just giving you multiple meta options. We're going to have a clearly defined meta as we go towards the end, but there will be preference based. This is the SVA build. Again, this is low recoil. You could go ahead and fire it just full auto. It doesn't have the fastest TTK. And you can see you have to control a little bit for recoil, not much, but when you're controlling the gun that way. But if you put it in semi-auto, you can just pretty much spam as fast as you can, and you won't get like the third bullet issue that you would get when it's full auto, where you can still spam, but you kind of, sometimes that third bullet will fire depending on how fast your trigger finger is or whatever. It's sometimes easier just to have a smoother recoil that does not move when you spam the trigger, you can almost look away, go AFK, and the bullets kind of go where you want them to go, which is a pretty nice thing, especially if you struggle with recoil management. Brings us to our next couple guns, and this is a one that did receive a little bit of nerf, but it's still pretty solid. And if you go with that new muzzle, you can actually get like no recoil. But overall, this gun doesn't have a ton of recoil. It's just a lower firing gun. So it punishes you for lack of accuracy, and it rewards you for that accuracy because it does still hit hard enough to get a decent TTK. You get the headshot in the mix. You're going to be killing faster. But you can see it's not going to move a ton. 30-round mag can be a little bit sketch at times, but overall, pretty good option. Then we get the buffed AMR, and you can go with the 100-round mag or the 50-round mag. In this particular build, it's built for a 50-round mag. Keeping in mind that it kind of has one of these faux or fake TTKs that's super fast, very similar to the Hurricane, where you need to get a headshot. In this particular case, if somebody does a bunny hop into a doorway and you shoot the legs once, it raises the TTK almost to 700, which makes it very non-competitive. So you got to keep that in mind. It will feel good most of the time, but if you shoot the leg ever, it'll feel like, what the heck happened? Why did it feel so slow? So you got to keep that in mind, but it is a very fun gun in terms of being able to mix it up. And I think that's what they've done with this current update. Obviously, the Swarm probably needs a little bit of work on that 100-round mag, and the MTZ Interceptor is kind of an issue. I don't like the iron sights on this gun either, by the way, but that's another thing. But once those get figured out, we're kind of in a really good spot in terms of long range and short range meta, where everything's killing a little bit slower at long range and killing around 600 milliseconds at that close range, which is like the ideal meta up close. The Pulemyot did get a slight nerf, but it's still very good at range. It's still gonna be competitive. You could swap this out with the LSW if you prefer that over this, but it's still a pretty solid option. And the class setup's pretty much the same. If you want even less recoil, again, you could swap out one of those muzzles for the lower recoil options. But in general, you get 100 rounds to shoot and the thing shoots straight. They did kind of mess it up, but I don't know, the optic is kind of wonky. You can kind of see where it does this weird, like little snappy effect. I'm not doing anything. That's not frames dropping. That's literally the gun having issues. So if you don't mind dealing with that, at least until that's fixed, you're going to be pretty good to go. Overall, shoot straight as it did before, just a little bit different damage. And then we got the WSP-9, which is a very solid option. Obviously, open bolt delay slows down its TTK slightly up close. When you do pull the trigger, it will have that little delay that is a little bit harder to notice for some, but it is definitely there. And you can kind of see this one all around good, not a ton of recoil. It's also good as a sniper support because you can go ahead and kind of have a decent amount of range on it where it will still kill pretty quickly. Kind of think about the Milano. It kind of fits in that little niche of Milano guns where maybe you could use this even as a long range on Bondal if you really just want to kind of mess around. And you can build it more for long range if that's what you're going for, but this one's built more for an SMG build. Then we're starting to get into some of these other guns that are pretty popular, which is the TAC Eradicator. This one is pretty good overall. Even though it got nerfed, it primarily got nerfed up close. At range, it's still pretty solid. You won't really notice the difference quite as much at range, and it doesn't have much recoil, but this one relies heavily on getting that first couple shots off, because if you miss those, then the TTK is a lot more mediocre. And if you're able to get those first shots, then it's pretty solid. So you kind of got to take it as is. Again, this is more of an iron sight build. It's kind of hard to get rid of anything if you're going to be using this. It almost looks like it's bugging out because it doesn't move. It's kind of weird, but that's how it is. Then we go ahead and get this brand new gun, which I think is 100% in the meta. And it's kind of tied there with the Swarm. I think what makes it so good is that its TTK is very reliable. You're going to get around 600, a little bit over 600 TTK from the testing. You'd have to land like 5 or 6 headshots to get a faster TTK, so it's not as practical. You do see only 4 attachments, and that's because it's bugged out. I leveled my gun early. They ended up fixing it. If you level up the gun, you will get a 50-round mag, and that is what I would run if you're going to run this gun. And overall, very solid. Again, I'm using that specific muzzle that lowers the recoil, and you kind of see it has those Grau-style iron sights, that Archangel, a little bit on the front end. Maybe not on the back with that covering it, but pretty solid overall. Movement's pretty good. A damage per mag, 50-round mag is very, very respectable. Reload seems decent. You got a lot of different things going for it where it's going to be a very easy gun to use. And on top of that, when you use this specific barrel, you're getting an extra bit of range. So that pushes out that first damage range to almost 21 meters, which is kind of crazy to have a 600-ish TTK up to 20 meters. And I don't think we can do a meta video without the RAM. And this is the current RAM that pretty much everyone's been using for quite a while. And I think Metaphor kind of popularized this because for whatever reason, when you use this combination of attachments, it just doesn't have any visual recoil. I think it could be pretty interesting with this Jack BFB, but overall, either way, whichever way you want to use it, it's pretty straightforward. Not a lot of visual shake, super easy to control. Once you get that first initial kick out of the way, it's going to be shooting straight. And I'm so glad they didn't touch it because currently it is just one of my favorite guns to use. And it's just so easy and reliable to use for sniper support, long range. If you're coming back out of the late game and you need one gun, this kills fast enough up close to compete. So all around a very solid option. And that brings us to the guns we've been using for already past month. They already addressed that they will be nerfed, so you can expect them to get a nerf at some point that actually nerfs them. I think the Swarm primarily only needs to nerf the 100 round mag, make it much slower. And then the MTZ Interceptor is still 3 to 4 shots, sometimes 5 at range if you're only hitting limbs or whatever. But realistically, it still kills insanely fast. Obviously, if you're playing solos or something, you could drop to the 50 round mag. You want no suppressor and you want no stock, you can go ahead and do that and put on the new muzzle, which can help with recoil. But again, this is kind of my go-to build. It may be a little bit slower than some people's builds, but I do like it for what it is. It fires insanely fast, almost 1100 RPM, super easy to use. And then obviously the DMR, which is kind of boring at this point, but everyone's using kind of the same thing. You spam the trigger, it doesn't hardly move. That new muzzle makes it even have a lower recoil, which is kind of dumb. It has even less recoil. So here we can go ahead and spam. It just does. It's so dumb. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Appreciate the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.